Amid rising concerns of a major escalation in the conflict between Israel and Iran, the U.S. is now involved. The military has mobilized combat aircraft and missile shooting warships to the Middle East. And this includes an order from Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to send a nuclear-powered submarine. It's armed with more than 150 missiles to the Middle East as well. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Scott Perry. He serves on several House committees, including the extremely important Intelligence Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee. He represents the 10th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. Congressman Perry, the General, welcome back to Washington Watch.
It's great to be with you, Jody. And unfortunately, these are unsettling times. And we shouldn't have to be sending our material, our equipment, and the men and women that serve in uniform to the Middle East. But yet again, that's what we find ourselves doing. And of course, the other side of the story that's not being spoken about much is the fact that this administration, President Biden, Vice President Harris, have approved over and over again more and more money for Iran and letting them, through their proxies, rattle their sabers, kill Jews, and wreak havoc around the region. And now we're being dragged further and further into what's the making of this administration. They've done this to themselves, and unfortunately, we're along with them.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I don't know if you were able to hear. I just got off with Chris Mitchell live from Jerusalem, talking about the situation there. What about your thoughts? And I do want to get to some other things, congressional business, some other issues, but the situation in Israel is certainly dire and tensions are high. Your thoughts about them potentially facing an attack from Iran?
Well, of course, all of us, none of us want that, and all of us have been concerned about that for a very long time. And again, the Biden administration has nobody to blame but themselves because they've enabled Iran to do this. They've allowed Iran to receive billions upon billions of dollars in money that had been withheld in the past. And of course, Iran selling its oil on the open market. This is all financing the bellicose activities that are occurring around the region and around the globe. And so all of us are concerned about Israel. Of course, no one fights more fair than Israel. Israel hasn't asked for a fight. They didn't ask for this fight to come to their doorstep. But you will find no one else that sends out leaflets or warns the enemy civilians that you have to leave before the strike happens. And yet that's what Israel constantly does. Even so, told that they need to participate in the ceasefire. They need to exercise restraint, and they need to stop what they're doing. Always responding to the attack is what Israel is faced with, and always then responding to the ridicule from the national and international anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic community. We're very concerned about Iran and their position now. Of course, President Biden has been telegraphing weakness around the globe since the beginning of his administration, and those chickens are coming home to roost right now.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that the U.S. finds itself in a position it is right now as it relates to Israel. If I can switch gears and come a little bit closer to home, the Congressional Budget Office has projected some pretty sobering growth figures, if you will, some predictions regarding the U.S. economy drastically slowing down in the years to come, specifically measured up against the GDP. Your thoughts on that?
Well, again, this is a crisis of the Biden-Harris administration's making, and of course, they do have some cohorts in the legislature. Of course, the Senate is run by Democrats. They keep on spending. Well, Jody, it didn't happen when you were here, and nothing has changed in the Senate. They actually refuse to do any spending bills, and even when they do them, they absolutely refuse to trim any spending whatsoever. They will only agree to spend more money. And of course, their compatriots in the House of Representatives are no different. And so all this increased money being thrown into the economy by the federal government without anything to back it up means every single dollar that our consumers, our bosses have goes less. It doesn't go as far. And so they can't they can't get the same amount of goods and services for $1 that they could 3.5 years ago. And of course, the projections by the CBO is that under Biden and Harris, they're just going to continue to spend recklessly the way that they are. And of course, the prices are going to keep going up. Wages are not going to go up commensurately. And so you're not going to be able to purchase as much with the dollars that you have, which means people are buying groceries with their credit card bills. People can't afford electricity. They can't afford gasoline. That's just the way it's been. And if we're going to have Harris as the president, that's the way it's going to continue.
Yeah, it's like you said. I mean, we've all seen this year after year. It seems over and over. It's the same old verse over and over, a little bit louder, a little bit worse, though it seems. And you and your colleagues there in the House Freedom Caucus, you're not willing to concede. You don't want to go back to yet another omnibus for government spending. And so there's the option of a continuing resolution, a CR. Tell us about all that real quickly. We've got a little over a minute. And if you will, I'd like to keep you over the break. I've got some more questions for you. But tell us about this spending.
You know, when we don't get our job done, when we don't come up with the spending package that's agreed to, then we have to find some way to fund the government past September 30th. That's the end of the federal fiscal year. It's usually done by continuing resolution until we can get that funding agreement made between the House and the Senate and the president. And so what that does is it keeps the current spending and the current policies in place until the impasse is broken. And oftentimes we can't even get any further than that. And then they pass what's called an omnibus, which means everything's thrown in it, and you either vote for it and keep the government open, or you vote against it for good reason, as you know, and then get accused of being for shutting down the government. You're not for shutting down the government. You just can't abide. You won't vote for spending your constituents into bankruptcy or continuing the same terrible policy that's bankrupting the country. But that's what we're going to be facing. The Freedom Caucus has said, no, we don't have to do that. Let's get our work done. And if we're going to pass a continuing resolution, let's make sure it includes the SAVE Act, which says that only people that are American citizens will vote in November's election. Now, the Democrats don't want that, Jody.
Congressman, let's leave it there.
Yeah.
Let's pick it up there when we come back from the break. I want to thank you for taking time to stay over a little bit longer. Scott, thank you for staying over the break. We really appreciate it.
Of course, Jody. And like I was saying, if we're going to do a continuing resolution, which just buys us some time to get the agreement, right? But let's get something for that. And those of us in the Freedom Caucus have told our leadership and the country, we want to include the SAVE Act. It passed the House of Representatives. It passed there. It's sitting in the Senate. And all that says is that if you're in America, you intend to vote, you must be an American citizen. Now, Jody, as you know, the Democrats oppose that. Now, they don't have any good reason for opposing it. Of course, Chuck Schumer's not bringing it up. Joe Biden doesn't want to talk about it. Certainly, Kamala Harris doesn't want to talk about it. Why wouldn't they want only American citizens voting in the presidential election? Of course, Kamala Harris is running for president, too. Wouldn't she just want American citizens voting, or is she interested in having someone else not eligible to vote to be voting as well? That should really be the question.
Yeah, listen, I just want to say thanks to you and all the members of the Freedom Caucus and some others, I'm sure, who will be supporting the SAVE Act, trying to push this through. And now's the ideal time to do it when you're dealing with the CR and omnibus, whatever's going to be coming up on the spending levels to protect our election and let only American citizens vote, which is already the way it's supposed to be. But we all know this is extremely volatile right now. This election is critically important that we secure it as much as possible. So thanks for your stance on that. If I can, I'd love to get your opinion on this, the topic, speaking of election of Governor Tim Walz.
Yeah.
Man, so much to deal with here. Scott, what about now their campaign is saying that they admit that he misspoke about his claims that he carried weapons of war. Tell us your reaction. As a veteran, as a general, give us your reaction to that.
Well, misspeaking is, Jody, in the public view, oftentimes we say things we didn't necessarily mean at the spur of the moment when it gets heated. But this is not misspeaking. This has been done over years and years of claiming his status as a retired sergeant major when he really wasn't a retired sergeant major. And of course, very few people knew the whole story, where he was serving in uniform and willing to come and accept the accolades that come from the honorable service in uniform, certainly willing to accept the pay. But when it came to actually going downrange, to going to the combat zone, suddenly he had to retire because he had to run for Congress and he couldn't be found. He abandoned his unit. A sergeant major is not a private. I was a private. When you're a sergeant major, you're the top enlisted person in the unit. And so your unit is dependent upon your leadership over a long period of time, because they get used to you, you get used to them, you understand where each other are coming from. And soldiers fight the way they train. Once you take one component out of it, it really has a grave circumstance for the unit that's heading into combat. And he just simply cut and ran when it came time to show up for the fight. I find it incredibly disgraceful. I have had soldiers that came to me when they got their orders to deploy and said, well, hold on, I didn't sign up for this. I thought I just joined for education benefits. And I had to remind them, you joined the military service, the uniformed military service. In my case, you joined the Army. What did you think was going to happen? Mr. Walz has much more explaining to do than I just misspoke. What he did was he betrayed his unit, he betrayed his country, and he's betraying the voters right now by trying to pull the wool over their eyes and thinking and having them just believe that he misspoke at one moment. This is a pattern of lying over something very precious to many people, which is honorable military service, and it is disgraceful.
It really is, and extremely well said from a patriot, from someone yourself who served and knows what it is to be deployed and retired as a general. There's so many. I know there's got to be tons of veterans who are upset about this. In fact, there was a Facebook post by John Cobb, who became lieutenant colonel of the Minnesota unit a few months after Walz quit to run for Congress, and he's criticized the governor. Do you expect these kind of criticisms to build as it goes forward?
Well, I do expect them to build, but I also expect that the people within the state will be concerned that that he might win as the vice president and exact retribution on them, or maybe even worse, that they'll lose and he'll remain the governor and then come after them. So there are going to be people that have firsthand knowledge that are going to be, let's say, reluctant to speak freely, but the rest of the members who have worn the uniform, who are not going to have to be worried about a Governor Tim Walz or a Vice President Tim Walz, are going to speak freely. And I will tell you, as one person that's worn the uniform for a long period of time, I find it disgusting, disgraceful, unacceptable, and I do not accept as an excuse or a reason that he misspoke. He misled the American people and the people of his state by design for years. Unacceptable.
Yeah, there's a big difference between misspoke and misled. And I think you hit that right on the head, putting it that way. Congressman Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, always great to see you. Retired general, former chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, dear friend and former colleague. Always great to see you. Thank you for joining us on Washington Watch.
Jody, God bless you. God bless this audience.